Okay, welcome back everybody to another episode of Tiff4Tat. I am Tiff,
And I am Tat.
and today we have a very special guest joining us from Zilliant. His name is Russ Halvorson. Russ, get us started. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you guys having me on the show. Long time listener, so this is exciting for me to get to participate. And so yeah, my name is Russ Halvorson. I've been in the CPQ quote to cash, product to cash space for it's coming up on about 12 years. So not as long as probably some of the listeners out there, but it feels much longer than 12 years. I actually got my start at a little company called Big Machines out of Deerfield, Illinois. I came in as a demo engineer. I didn't know what ERP meant from an acronym perspective or CRM. And I was like, this sounds like a pretty cool company, though. And I actually had a lot of experience at the time working with services. And so a lot of times I go into customers and I'd have to change orders and things that they'd done, and I'd have to do it on the phone, and it took forever. So I remember when somebody explained what the acronym was, CPQ, I was totally excited and stoked because I saw a ton of value. And so Big Machines was where I got my opportunity to get started. I worked through the pre-sales team. Fairly lucky that company got acquired by Oracle. It's now Oracle CPQ. And then after that, I joined a little company called SteelBrick for about 3 days before it was officially acquired by Salesforce. And so, really for the last part of my career, I worked at Salesforce as a leader in solution engineering, as a leader in the product team. And then I had the opportunity to join Zilliant late last year. So very excited to join the team here as the global solution engineering leader for Zilliant.
Yeah, great. What a journey. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah, no,
so um Russ, you have been working in the CPQ space for a long time. And then, tell us about, something about Zillion and what makes the Zillion solution, CPQ solution and other, other products that people may be interested in. What makes it different that, from your competitors like Oracle, Salesforce?
yeah, no, for sure. It's good question. I think what's really cool about Zilliant, and a lot of people might know this, is actually founded back in 1998. So the company's actually been around for quite some time. And it was actually one of the first companies that really actually leaned into leveraging AI and machine learning to try to solve a real business problem. And so I'm sure we'll talk more about AI. It's obviously the hotness right now in the space. But we've been doing AI for a really long time. And when the company was founded, the purpose was to really drive at, how do we use machine learning AI to get better about pricing, to optimize pricing. And so from a company perspective, like that's really where our secret sauce is, that is our expertise. The company's invested a lot actually recently. We brought some folks over like Bernard Kang from EY, who ran their pricing advisory team. We just hired a guy named Stephen Lazou, who's a longtime author. We've got folks like Jim Vaughn on the team that have been in the company for a long time. So from a differentiating perspective, we care very much about pricing. We have a lot of pricing nerds, and that's really where we're going to stand out. But as a company, we actually have a pretty big suite of products. So our goal is to help companies manage what we call the pricing life cycle. And so I've spent the majority of my career at CPQ companies, where obviously CPQ, configure, price, quote. Pricing is a core component of that, but a lot of times in CPQ, we really only think about the execution piece, which is like, okay, give me your price list. I'm going to put it in the system, and there's going to be some rules, and I'm going to execute it, right? And I'm generalizing, but in general, that's kind of how CPQ thinks about it. When you think about the pricing life cycle, you start to get it more into, okay, like how do I want to price my products? When do I want to make pricing changes? When I execute my pricing, like what are the primary systems? Where do I need to push those prices? And then after your pricing's been out in the field and you're starting to get feedback, how do I run analysis on that and drive that into, again, that full pricing life cycle? And so as a company, we just have a lot of tools and products that kind of support that end to end. I'm happy to talk about those, but we definitely have a CPQ as well, but pricing is really where our expertise lies in a company, in the company.
So do you, I assume that you have some sort of configurator, and how is that compared to big machine, from maybe give somebody, give some people like me who do, I don't know anything about Zillion, give me some idea on how different is it compared to to the Oracle's configurator. So that's the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, really, really good question. So I think, I guess just to talk a little about it. So the CPQ product that Zilliant sells, we acquired a little company called In Mind Cloud, or IMC. I think it's about 14 or 15 months ago. It's a little bit over a year. And that product was built by some folks that had some very, very deep SAP expertise.
Hmm.
Um, and so from a product perspective, if you're familiar with Variant Configurator, if you're familiar with SAP in general, you're going to feel very, very comfortable in that product. And so from a configuration perspective, the way that we talk about configuration, there's attributes, but there's materials. Kind of those core SAP nomenclature are very prominent in the product. But in terms of like how it compared to like other configures, like a big machines or a Logic, very, very similar in terms of capability. I've actually worked, so I worked at Logic too. I worked at Oracle. I worked at Salesforce. I actually think this is probably the most extensible CPQ and configuration platform that I've ever seen. There's some really interesting things that we do with scripting and the Groovy Java language, or Groovy, which is like a subset of Java, that allow you to do, I think a lot more than maybe other configurators in market. But if if I gave you a user and you logged in today, configuration attributes, constraint rules, recommendation rules, bill of material type rules, a lot of those same concepts under different nomenclature exist in our product. And so if you're a manufacturing customer, just somebody with complex configurations, we can solve it pretty easily with the tool that we have.
Okay, thank you. That's great to know.
Yeah, that's great. So Russ, you mentioned AI, and we're definitely going to come back to that. Definitely want to dive deeper. But before we get there, from your perspective, what are the biggest changes that you've seen in the quote to cash landscape over the few years, and where do you think that it's headed?
Yeah, this is like my favorite topic, because I think about it a lot.
You're on the right podcast. It's a big topic.
Yeah, I think about it a lot, and I think what's interesting to me, I mean, we could talk a little bit like how we got to where we're at today, but what's interesting to me is it feels like the space right now is probably the most open that I think it's been. Maybe going back to like when I started my career, and you had like Aptus, and you had CPQ or Oracle CPQ, and you had some of these other kind of vendors, but I think the market has grown significantly since I started my career. So I think there's a lot of buyers, a lot of customers that are really interested in it. But there's really not, I think, a dominant player. And there's companies, obviously, like a Salesforce who has the most customers and the most revenue. But I don't really see like a dominant product where like if you ask a customer like, hey, like what CPQ you're going to buy, you probably get a very different answer depending on vertical, depending on use case, depending on size. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for vendors in the market, even kind of the smaller players, to expand, their footprint and their market share. So I think that's probably one of the big things I'm seeing is just it's very, very open. The other thing that I'm really seeing that probably wasn't happening as much, maybe even like 2, 3, 4 years ago, is that there's a lot more interest in bringing in point solutions to solve very complex problems. And so, like the biggest example of that I think is like Logic, right? Salesforce has got a great product, they got a lot of customers, got a lot of revenue. But if you're in a very, very complex manufacturing or just complex configuration space and you need speed and performance, you might want to bring in an additional tool to kind of help support that specific use case. And I think customers are a lot more open to saying, you know what, this is going to fit inside of my technical stack. I don't need to have everything on one platform. And so that's where companies like Logic, that's where companies like Zilliant, there's other vendors out there. I think they're seeing more opportunities and customers are more open to bringing those kind of point solutions in to solve those problems.
Yeah, great. And then in the future, do you think that someone will arise as the dominant CPQ platform, or do you think that we'll see more of these like specific tools for specific use cases?
Yeah, that's another really good question. I think right now I don't necessarily see it happening. The other call it a problem, but the other observation is the definition of CPQ is gotten much muddier and grayer. I spent a lot of time talking to analysts and the way that they evaluate CPQ. If you look at the requirements that they want to see from a feature perspective, there's subscriptions, there's billing components, there's rev rec components. A lot of that I probably would blame on Salesforce because, it had such a great quote to cash product that brought a lot of that stuff together. But building that footprint into a single product and platform, I think is very difficult, especially very difficult if you're a smaller company. And so we'll have to see, what ends up happening with some of the smaller folks. I think right now, probably the play for these companies is to get really, really special in one particular area, and differentiate that way. But if you have the ability and the execution to expand your footprint, you could potentially go after a bigger piece. So, and I wouldn't count out the big guys either. I'm not sure what Oracle's doing these days, but Salesforce has obviously got a strategy where they're moving a lot of stuff to core. Conga, I'm hearing a lot of noise from lately, which I thought was kind of super interesting. So, we'll have to see what happens. I don't have a prediction. So,
Yeah.
Okay, well, in 6 months, I'll ask to consult your crystal ball again. And
yeah, if I had to answer, Zilliant, that's the answer.
Yeah, you do have a good name. That definitely is pretty easy to remember. The both Salesforce and Oracle, they have been pushing, revenue cloud, all that. I can think that's the, like kind of the buzzword, these days. They're kind of bundling a bunch of solution, a bunch of the product together, and then push it as a revenue, revenue handling solution, in the future. That sounds like the direction that, that the market is going. It sounds like the way that, Zilliant is also positioned really, really well in, in that space. So, that kind of leads to my, my next question. You have been in this area, working this area pretty, for a long time. I think all of us have been here, been in this space for a long time. So what drives your, what makes you excited about, the solution that you are working with, and then there's the problems that you're solving, and then what is the revenue, you guys have a lot of, pricing, products. What makes the serious, what problems are you helping your customers solve, with Zilliant?
Yeah, so I mean, maybe to answer the first question around just kind of like what drives me, I sometimes I wish I picked a different technology area than CPQ because I think it's a very complex, difficult problem. But I also think that's why I like it, and what keeps it very, very interesting. So I just love the problem. I think if you're going to enjoy work and you're going to have to work doing something that is, I don't know if we call it fun, but I do like solving problems. And the cool thing about this space is like even in the same industry, you could talk to two different manufacturing companies that manufacture widgets, the same thing. The way that they'll think about how they sell, how they structure that in their systems, how they go to market, can be very, very different. And so like there's always an opportunity to learn, and an opportunity to solve big problems for those customers. I think in terms of Zilliant, I mean, we have a pretty big product suite. So I think I mentioned earlier, our primary, I think, area is pricing lifecycle. And so if you want to optimize prices, if you want to manage prices, if you want to work on pricing strategy, we have products that are specifically built for that. But we also have things like revenue intelligence. So we talk about AI, if you want to analyze your transactional data and make recommendations, you kind of like, what other customers purchased, analyze those transactions and come up with recommendations based on that transactional history. Like we've got a solution for that. If you have CPQ and you're a manufacturing company, and you want to leverage, a variant configurator, outside of SAP, like we've got a solution for that. If you have contract, agreement management. So if you're managing large agreements with customers, we have a solution for that. So it's really that quote to cash space, but adjacent to that, pricing optimization, pricing management, anything really in that pricing lifecycle circle that I mentioned earlier. So I don't know if I answered all your questions, Tat, but I think I did. So let me know if I
You
missed it.
did. You did. That's perfect.
Cool.
Great. Okay, so let's dig into AI. What role do you see AI playing in the future of quote to cash, and in particular about pricing strategies?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think there's probably a lot of right answers. I also think it's one of those things where we'll have to kind of see where the market takes it. But I just want to call out, like, we at Zilliant, we've been using AI for a really long time, and so AI is kind of a catch-all. There's a lot of different flavors of it. I think when people say AI today, they kind of lean into generative AI and ChatGPT. But we've been leveraging AI, linear regressions to drive pricing optimization for a really long time. When I think about the broader market, I kind of break it down into a couple different areas. One, it's just super obvious and kind of cliche, but just like automating difficult tasks. So when you think about everything that goes to adminning like a CPQ tool, you got a lot of data management, data transformation. You got to validate the outcomes of what you've configured as a user, correct mistakes. A lot of times there's scripting and integrations. And there's, just a ton, I think, of just like, manual type labor to get this stuff to work. I think AI is going to have a huge opportunity to cut through a lot of that in a good way. So I don't think we're going to lose admins. I'm not advocating that AI is going to replace admins, but I think it's going to make it a lot more enjoyable to manage these kind of tools because you're going to have a lot of help, and the system's going to do a lot more for you. I think the other thing that we're going to see is this opportunity to just streamline the user side of it as well. There's actually a couple, Logic's a great example of a company that is working on a solution, actually released a solution like this. But if you're configuring a very complex piece of equipment and there's thousands of attributes on this thing, and it has a lot of flexibility and configurability, there's probably a solution in there that makes sense for you as a user, as a seller, for the customer. And rather than forcing you to go through 10,000 attributes and fill everything out, at some point you can probably get pretty close and be like, hey, can you please just finish this for me? Can you make a recommendation? Can you automate this? I think use cases like that, not just even for configuration, but pricing deals, I think for like deal desk, optimizing, payment terms and discounts to limit the amount of approvals that a deal needs to go through. I think there's going to be a lot of help that AI is going to drive in that kind of area. I think the other thing that's going to happen too is just, we've got a great data science team. We've got a great pricing advisory team. I think over time, you're going to see more opportunities to embed that expertise. For example, Tiff4Tat, if we could take everything you know about CPQ and implementing and put it into AI, if somebody like me could go into the app and rely on that, historical data and get information from AI to drive good decisions, right?
Hey, I thought you said you didn't want to replace admins.
Yeah.
Where's this going, Russ? I need a job, okay?
We all need jobs, but I think, if you think the reality is like these, bigger projects, they take 3 to 6 months. If you can cut that down and get more out of your CPQ tool because you're going faster, implementing more, there's less phases to the project that go quicker. I don't think folks are going to lose jobs. I think there's going to be a lot more productivity that we're going to get out of these tools, and companies are going to get a lot more value faster. So I think that's where we're going to be going with AI. I think it's going to come out in a lot of different ways, but if I had to pick two, it's the productivity of admins and really making it easier for users to do their jobs. So
yeah, that's great. So just a follow-up question to that, what kind of data do customers need to fuel these AI solutions? So we talk to a lot of customers who are not quite ready to implement AI solutions, but our recommendation to them is that they start standardizing their data so that once they're ready for that, their data is clean and they have a good data source to feed whatever AI products they want to use. Are you making similar recommendations, or what have you seen in terms of data?
yeah, for sure. I mean, in the pricing space, we have minimums on what we would recommend to even like begin to use, AI to make recommendations on. And they're not small. You're probably talking, 50,000, 100,000 transactions at a minimum. The more you have, the better that data is, the better results you're going to get. But in general, the more data, the better. Um, I also think though it's going to depend on like the use case that you're really trying to get out of AI. So, for example, if you're just trying to put together, making it easier for somebody to create a quote with an agent. I saw a demo the other day from Salesforce around agents to create quotes. If you're using, generative AI to help you write a better proposal or correct your work, those are technologies that you don't have to really train and do a lot to. I mean, you want to validate, make sure that you're getting, a result that's not hallucinated. But in general, definitely more data for predictive, for, data analysis. But if you're just working with Gen AI to, automate some tasks and do some things, like you probably get a lot of value out of that without having the data. So
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's I want to see the one day that they help me with the kind of configure that we built. It's still a lot of them. It's not so easy. I think they need CPQ because the problem is complex, right? If it's a simple problem, they probably don't need CPQ, right? So, but anyway, they probably can make things faster. Maybe make the admin even simpler. Maybe can automatically generate some simple rules. But in the day that is the whole thing is automated, that probably takes some time. So, Tiffany, your job is safe. I think my job is probably safe too.
I agree that
Encouragement.
yeah, there's a lot of SaaS is dead posts, which like I've probably responded 10 times and then deleted it because I don't want to be too controversial.
Yeah,
Uh, and I'm not an AI expert yet. I've been using ChatGPT since I could buy the plus version. I think it's great technology, but if you use it that much, then you start to understand like it's far from perfect. And so the
yeah,
example I give when I talk to customers about this is, you know, ChatGPT is great and AI is great until it sells something to a customer that it invented, and and you're on the hook for it to the tune of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. We've heard about those kinds of mistakes in our career that humans make because it happens. I wouldn't trust AI to take a configuration rule set and do it all automatically for me yet. We'll see where we go, but I think it's an opportunity to make it a lot easier for us to implement those kind of rules though, or check them. But
yeah.
yeah, we're not quite there yet. So.
But I mean, there's definitely a lot of misconception on what AI can do these days, right? Because people think, oh, AI can probably do it, very quickly, very soon. But I don't know how true how true that is. But yeah, no, you have been in the CPQ, space for a long time. So what are some of the misconceptions, that people look at CPQ and then they what do people expect CPU to do, and then but that's not not that you have seen in your years of experience, what in the CPU space, in the revenue space. How do you see that what are the things that you encounter all the time that that kind of misleading in the expectation on what CPQ does?
Yeah. No, I think probably the biggest one is that probably customers don't realize how much power they have, I think, to change. And so the example I'll give is, a lot of times you have customers that they've got a very specific process that's in place, either IT or the business, and they come to you and they're just like, we need to do it this very specific way. And as a vendor or as a consultant, my instinct is, well, why are you trying to do it that way? You try to get to that second and third and fourth question. And if you ask enough of those, eventually you get to the point where like somebody's, well, that's just the way that we've always done it. And I think a lot of customers could make these kind of transformations, these implementations, much easier, much better if they ask those questions in the organizations. I don't think people realize how much power they have to impact change in their company. Good change, by the way, to help the company sell more, to sell faster, et cetera. And so that to me is probably one of the bigger misconceptions. And the example I usually go to customers to try to highlight this is the approval process is the easiest place to ask. It's like, well, how big is your approval process? Oh, it's 10 people. it's these groups, it takes like 3 days to get through it. And then I'm like, okay, well, how many times have you rejected a quote that's gone through this approval process? And like no one can remember the last time when it was rejected, right? So like that's the anecdote I kind of use. So I think that's one. The other big misconception that I think customers have is I think they need to demand more from vendors and SIs. So realize I'm a vendor and you guys are integrators on it, but if we think about the market, how wide open it is, I think there's a huge opportunity for innovation in this space. And I think customers have kind of gotten used to big vendors and SIs being like, well, you got to do it this way because the tool can only have 500 attributes and 300 lines. And like, this is the box and you need to draw your company in this box. And so like on one hand, like companies really should figure out like, can you do it better? Right? Like that's the previous comment I just made. But demand more from vendors. Like, no, this is how I need 1,000 lines. I need 2,000 attributes. Like I'm selling complex equipment, not not widgets. And so I think customers probably don't realize how much power they have to drive change and innovation in the tools that are out there. So
Yeah, I'm with you. It goes both ways, right? I'm
yeah.
working with a company who's been in business for 110 years. And so there have been a few times where it's like, well, this is how we've always done it. And on the one hand, it's like we call it Sally, same as last year, right? Well, we're just doing it because it's the same way we did it last year, But on the other hand, it's like this business is a multi-billion-dollar business and they have been in business for 110 years. So clearly they are doing something right. And they need the system to support the business that they've been doing for 110 years. So I get your point. It's a good one.
Yeah, no, it's definitely give and take. So
Yeah, it is, there's people are very creative. So, when you look at people, who's doing the job every day, they come up with, pretty innovative solutions. And even though some of them are like really, manual, but, a lot of them could be automated pretty quickly. I mean, that's why, I'm kind of excited to see, a lot of the software companies are actually talking to customers and listening to them more to understand, okay, why are you guys doing that? At least, what I see, like Salesforce, Oracle, they got the customer a lot more involved than what I see before, which is really good because they're now, they're actually solving a problem instead of coming up with a problem and try to solve it, right? So they have some real problem to solve, and then they see it. Sometimes when we take it to the vendors, it's very hard to convince them, oh, this is how people do one business. And now, when they hear it from the customer directly, they can, it has a lot more weight than coming from from my integrator, because I get, I talk to, because I work with Oracle mostly, so I talk to Oracle and I say, this is what we need, but a lot of times doesn't go anywhere. But like I'm really glad that vendors like you are actually listening to that kind of feedback. So, with the Zilliant solution, what are some of the difficult problems that you help customer solve in the quote to cash space? Maybe you can give the audience some examples on you don't have to mention the customer name, but just just tell us what some of the quote to cash problem that your solution is really really good at.
yeah, no, for sure. So I think the example I'll use is this. It's actually a company out of Asia that they're a manufacturing company, but what they do is it's more like engineer to order type use cases. So they have plants. They'll make anything you want. And when they actually go to quote, it's not like, hey, I want to buy a tractor, or I want to buy a combine, or I don't know why I'm doing farm equipment, solar plant, whatever. They might go to this customer and be like, hey, like we want to manufacture brake pads for a new automobile that's coming out. And so they've never made it before in these factories. And so what they actually do with Zilliant is they actually configure the entire manufacturing process for what the customer wants to make. And so if you think about that problem, it's not like, what color you want it to be, like what size are the wheels. It's, how many plants are you going to need? What's the lead time going to be on manufacturing these things? Like what's the labor? What's the type of labor that I'm going to need? And from that kind of perspective, it's a very attribute-based problem. It's collecting data, but not just collecting the data, running some complex math, doing API calls to get information around, how long it takes to change one particular manufacturing plant versus another one. And so in that kind of a use case, there's just thousands of attributes that we're capturing inside of the configuration. And then what the customer actually does with this is one of the coolest things in our product. We actually have, and whenever I say this, it kind of gives me, makes my hair stand up because I've spent my whole career battling Excel. But there are a lot of really good use cases for it. And our product actually is really, really deep integration with Excel. And so what you can actually do is you can actually take an Excel file, you can upload it into our system, and we can actually populate it and build on top of it. And so what this customer does is they have a profit and loss and a cost analysis for these projects. They need to present that data. It's a lot of data. They need to present it in a way that their customers can consume it. And so after they do these configurations, the back and forth, the pricing, all that, they spit out this probably 10 tab Excel file. It's a full P&L on how much it's going to cost to manufacture that brake pad. And Zilliant CPQ is powering the whole thing. So that's probably, in a very extreme example of kind of like what we can do. But I bring up that customer all the time. You always get challenged. Well, can you do this use case? Like, can you do this? Just like, well, let me tell you the story about this company. Like, that's kind of my go-to. And so that's a pretty unique problem that I really actually haven't seen in my career in any other tool. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I love that.
about like 8 or 9 years ago, I went to a sales guy, opportunity with a sales guy. The the people always ask what is the biggest competitor with with at the time it was the Oracle CPQ, and the Oracle salesperson says Excel.
yeah.
It's amazing how what people have done with Excel, as far as like on everyday work. There are just so many things people have done. Like my last project, basically the whole thing just replaced Excel. It's
I don't
amazing.
think it's changed. I honestly don't think it's changed. I mean, it's probably not back then. It was probably 70%. I don't know if there's that many customers on Vended right now, but I still think Excel or do nothing is probably the biggest competitor for
Yeah.
everybody. So
Yeah, definitely. There's usually at least one component that's on Excel still, even if it's not the full system. It's like, okay, this price list, or if it's fully configured, you want to go here to this Excel, or like you mentioned, like the labor, like figuring out what labor you need for which pieces of the manufacturing process, that's in a spreadsheet, so there's usually at least one spreadsheet flying around when we arrive on a project. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears here and I'm going to ask you something not related to CPQ. So, Russ, when you're not working, what is your favorite way to unwind? Do you have any hobbies or passions outside of work?
yes, good question. So I'm married. I've got two boys. They're 13 and 10. So right now, it's hanging out with these guys as much as I can. And so I'm actually a big golfer too. I played a lot when I was in high school, and then I took like 10 years off. I don't know what I was thinking because it's very relaxing and fun to do. And so I picked it up in the last 2 or 3 years again. And I play a lot with my kids. And so that's really where I spend. If I got a spare, I mean, sales engineering, you're on the road a lot. Any spare time I've got, and if the sun is shining, because I'm in Chicago, it's cold right now. I try to be out on the golf course. If you're going to twist my arm, I am a nerd, so I don't think you can see it because of my backdrop, but I have a Stormtrooper helmet behind me. I have a Darth Vader cutout in the corner. So I do like to watch sci-fi and read a lot of sci-fi books, that kind of thing. So
Nice, nice. Have you ever been to Hollywood Studios, Disney World?
you know what? I've been to Disney World, but I have not been there since the new stuff came out. So my oldest is turning 13 in like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and he wants to go do it this year. So I think I don't know, we'll probably go to Disney World this year. So
Yeah, do it. There's a
for
whole,
him, not me, but I'll have fun too.
yeah, definitely not. But there is a whole Star Wars, so.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I have two boys also. They're younger than yours. They're 4 and 7 now. So when people ask me what I do outside of work, same answer.
Yeah.
My children.
Yeah. Hate to be cliche, but yeah, they're fun. So yeah.
Cool, cool.
Um, actually, before we before we close, I see in your background, the you have the Mindshare 2025, background. Can you tell us a little bit more, what that is, and then what is it, like a special event happening soon?
Yeah, no, thanks for asking. Yeah, so Mindshare is the Zilliant branded user conference that we have. We actually do 2 of them a year. So the next one that's coming up is our US based one, which is going to be in Austin, Texas. It's going to be I think the dates are on it behind me. It's just terrible that I don't know it off
It
the
says
top of my
April
head.
22,
Yeah,
22nd, and
yeah,
24th.
it's April 22nd through the 24th. And really what we do is we bring our customers together. We bring our partners and prospects, and really just anybody is welcome that's interested in pricing and pricing lifecycle and CPQ. But it's really just 2 days of getting people together to talk about, quote to cash. And it's a ton of fun. We bring in usually a good headline keynote. It'll be pricing focused, be an opportunity to collaborate and meet with folks. And it's on a golf course this year. I think they did it there last year as well. But so if you want to golf, it's a great venue to golf. And then we'll have another one actually in Amsterdam later in the year. So I think the dates on that are coming. But if you're in EMEA and you want to come to a sweet, awesome pricing conference, we've got one there too.
Yeah, great. I went in 2023 and I can confirm it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it definitely is, and I'll be there. So happy to talk CPQ and any other topics while I'm out there.
Yeah, great. Well, let's switch this up, Russ. Do you have any questions for us?
I probably have a ton that I'd love. Maybe I'll get you offline to answer all of them. But I guess want to appreciate you for having me on the show, both of you. But what is Pierce seeing in the pricing space, price optimization? I've been lucky enough to kind of work for enough companies on different sides, but just curious, what you guys are seeing in the market.
You want me to speak on first, Tad, or you got?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was actually talking to somebody about this earlier today, but so my background, I've been in the CPQ space for 6 or 7 years now, always as an implementer at an SI. So the first few years were mostly SaaS companies, and there's a lot of complexity around pricing in the SaaS world when you have the element of time, right? We've talked about this before on the podcast too, but like proration, amendments, renewals, all that can get pretty complex pretty quick. But the complexity that I'm seeing the most in the manufacturing space is really twofold. So manufacturers in general break up their products into kind of 3 buckets. One is just standard off-the-shelf items that have a price, and that's that. Then there's partially configured. So there's like a template in which you have to follow in order to configure something. And then there's like the engineer to order, which is something that they've never created before. They might never create again. It's fully custom. So as far as pricing complexity, there's really, those 3 problems to solve, right? How do you price standard products? That's the easiest. How do you price those middle partially configured ones? And then how do you price something that you've never built before, right? And the other kind of piece to this, the shift that I've seen is that manufacturers are going from like a cost plus markup model where they go, okay, well, let's calculate all the things that it takes for us to build this thing. What is our cost? The labor, the materials, the machines, everything like that. And then how much margin do we want to make? Okay, let's increase it by 10, 20, 30%, whatever their margin is, right? But especially since COVID, a lot of that has gone out the window because where manufacturers really want to be is where we call it market-based pricing. So what will the market buy this item for, right? What is a fair market value? Because maybe it is 10% margin, but maybe it's 50% margin. And of course, every company wants to extract the maximum amount of revenue from their customers, right? So I would say that definitely a way to solve those three buckets, and then a shift from cost plus markup or margin-based pricing into market-based pricing. And I have seen a lot of interest in AI. So how can AI solve that problem and analyze past transactions to see where the market will be, or even outside data, not their own internal transactions necessarily, because that doesn't necessarily represent what the market is at right now. You know, COVID was a great example of that, especially for manufacturers. Pricing got a little wild.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, from what I see is pricing definitely it has always been like a hot topic. Pricing, the at AI is also a hot topic these days. People always want to say, am I optimizing my my price to to get the most profit, right? So that's the AI, I think, is going to play a major role, and I see a lot of companies they want to explore that. The other thing is like when I first started, CPQ is mostly a sales tool, and nowadays people are looking at more like an end-to-end solution, really truly a quote to cash, all the way to even beyond cash, even after you make the sale, people want to say, okay, a existing customer is always the best customer. If they can get more out of the customer, definitely it will be a benefit, because it's not hard to get it's not easy to get a customer. Once you get a customer, you want to say, hey, stay a customer, not just with the thing that you have bought. They also going to I see more and more subscription based kind of selling to customers, to to try to get more revenue from existing customer. That's a trend. So it really is is the CPQ space is a lot more broader than than just the CPQ, just sale.
Yeah.
A lot of customers actually say, hey, I have CPQ, I want to do e-commerce, and that's the other thing that it makes they want to say, hey, I want to make it easy for customers to do business with me, because that's
Yeah.
where my revenue comes, so that's what.
Yeah, no, yeah, 100%. And just to kind of piggyback on both those comments, so I think the other thing when you were talking about, Tiffany, the manufacturing pricing space, the trend that I have also been seeing is, like, you have those three scenarios, but there's also this push to like products as a service in
Yeah.
manufacturing.
Yep.
And that even gets more complex, because when you get into that product management, like, subscriptions are, to your point, difficult with amendments, proration, all the thing. Now you throw a configured product that needs to be updated. There's configuration rules on top of that. It's just another dimension that I think is, it'll be interesting to see how vendors kind of solve that. And then I wanted to talk about the market-based pricing. So we call it value-based. I'm not sure what's the best right term for it. We call it value-based, but we actually do a lot of workshops with customers. We got I think I mentioned Stephen Lazou is a big advocate of this, and so we're seeing a lot of that as well, as customers pushing to more of that market-based or value-based pricing. So.
yeah, that's good. So does Zilliant solve the problem of where do you get that data? So like if I'm a manufacturer and I've always done cost plus market pricing and I've sold everything at a 20-25% margin, my data set is not going to be great for where I want to go, right? Like I want to find out what will the market pay for my item, not necessarily what have I sold the item for previously.
Yeah. So this is exactly what we try to solve for. I think there's different flavors and variations, but I'll give you a customer example. So one of our customers is Benny Keith, which I don't know if that's as common up here in the Midwest, but they're in 22 states. They're a food distribution company. And so when you think about, you probably see other food distributors on the road, but if you think about a restaurant, they're buying food and things on a regular basis, mayonnaise, ketchup, burgers, all that kind of thing. And you think about the grocery store, like the number of products we can buy as a consumer, it's just a huge, huge amount of SKUs, a huge amount of products. There's different sizes, et cetera. It's the permutations are like in the billions. And restaurants tend to be lower margin endeavors in general. Like they're just razor thin on margin. And so Benny Keith, what they need to do is they need to take all that historical transaction data, they need to take their cost data, and they need to go into sometimes these mom and pops or even bigger chains and figure out like what is the optimal price that I need to be charging, that the customer is willing to pay, that is competitive with what's in market, that is going to generate enough margin that I'm not, losing money on this deal. And so one of the things that they did, sorry to tell you a longer story, one of the things they did is they did a little experiment where they took 5 products and they went out to their most seasoned sales reps and they told them what the product was and they told them what the price was and they said, hey, what do you think this is the right price? Is it high or is it low? And they did this in multiple regions. And every sales rep got it wrong. So so what they've done and what they have been doing, they've been a customer for a long time, is they actually use Zilliant to basically make an AI scientific prediction on, what is that right price to charge that customer. And there's a lot more that goes into it, because the more that you charge, typically the less volume you're going to push out. And so usually there's a place on that curve that customers want to be to generate the most revenue at the right margin. That's squarely what we do. I think value-based pricing is a little bit different than that. I think it's there's variance on how you go to market with value-based pricing because it's a little bit more of a I think it's better for like a software type company where it's just like, well, I don't know, it's $1 million and the customer, well, that's way too much. All right, well, it's 900K. There's a little bit of a back and forth in negotiation, but in terms of like price recommendations, the Benny Keiths of the world are really using our software to answer that question.
Yeah, that's great. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And that's the thing, I fairly new to me and, I've been in the space a very long time, but never this close to kind of like the pricing side of it. And so once you start to kind of open the hood a little bit and see what's possible, there's some really cool opportunities that our customers are pulling off. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, I think we're done with questions. Do you have any closing words?
I just, again, really appreciate the invite. I think one of my favorite things about the CPQ space is it tends to be a quote to cash. It tends to be kind of a small community. And, I've built a lot of really good relationships with people over the years. Some of them I'm competing with now. But at the end of the day, we're all friends. And I think in general, folks in the space just really, they do appreciate the problem. They understand the problem. And it's built a really good network of people that, I like to call my friends. So appreciate you guys inviting me to the show and, looking forward to hopefully lots more podcasts from you guys. I've enjoyed the ones I've listened to. So.
Of course. Well,
thanks for joining us.
If a listener wants to get in contact with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
It's a good question. Probably LinkedIn. Just ping me on LinkedIn, connect me on LinkedIn, send me a note. And I tend to show up at Dreamforce and kind of the other big conferences. I think we're going to be at SAP this year, which will be fun. But yeah, LinkedIn's the best to get in touch with me. And definitely want to make connections, so please reach out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.